Chapter 1. The scent of burnt rosemary clung to the air in the castle kitchens, thick and bitter enough to make anyone's eyes water. Mira scrubbed at the iron cauldron with hands already raw from the day's work, her knuckles splitting in the cold water. She never spoke, never complained. There was no point when your voice had been taken before you could even remember having it. The wolves of Thornridge Castle called her the Silent One. Some with pity, most with suspicion. Her black hair, streaked with an unusual stripe of silver down one side, marked her as different. Her silence marked her as dangerous. She'd arrived at the castle gates 12 years ago, a small child with no memory of where she'd come from, clutching a burned scrap of cloth that smelled like smoke and wild lavender. The servants took her in because no one else would, and she'd been scrubbing their floors ever since. But every night, when the kitchen fires dimmed and the nobles retreated to their silk-lined chambers, Mira slipped away. Down past the armory, through the forgotten grain stores, to a rusted gate that led into the overgrown eastern gardens. A place the castle had abandoned after the plague 20 years prior. And there, in the shadow of crumbling stone walls covered in climbing moon vine, waited the wolf they all wanted dead. Tonight was no different. She descended the worn steps carefully, a bundle tucked under her arm. Dried meat from the smokehouse, half a loaf of black bread, and a small flask of broth she'd saved from her own portion. He emerged from the shadows like smoke given form. Tall, lean, with scars crossing his bare chest where silver chains had once burned. His amber eyes caught the moonlight, reflecting it back like twin flames. "You're late," he rasped, his voice rough from disuse. Mira lifted an eyebrow and set the food down on a flat stone between them. "Still not talking, I see," he muttered, then tore into the bread like a man starving. Which Mira supposed he was. She'd found him 3 months ago, half dead and bleeding, collapsed near the garden's old fountain. Anyone else would have reported him immediately. Rogues were killed on sight. It was the law. But something in his eyes had stopped her. Not desperation. Recognition. Like he'd been waiting for her. She sat a few paces away, her back against a pillar wrapped in dead vines, and watched him eat. He wasn't a boy anymore. Not like when she'd first found him. His frame had filled out despite the hunger, his movements sharper, more controlled. But the scars remained, and the haunted look that never quite left his face. "Do you ever wonder," he said after a long silence, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand, "why you keep coming back here?" Mira tilted her head. "I mean, you don't know me," he continued, amber eyes fixed on her. "You can't even ask me who I am or what I've done. For all you know, I'm exactly the monster they say I am." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small carved token, a wolf's tooth wrapped in leather cord. She'd made it herself from a tooth she'd found in the gardens, bleached white by time. She held it out to him. His eyes widened. That's a protection charm. An old one." She nodded. "Who taught you to make this?" His voice had gone quiet, almost fearful. Mira pointed to herself. "You just knew how." Another nod. He stared at the charm for a long moment, then carefully took it from her palm, his fingers brushing hers. "No one's given me anything in years," he whispered. "Nothing that wasn't meant to hurt." Mira's expression softened. He looked up at her, really looked at her, and said, "My name is Kale." It was the first time he'd told her. She smiled, just slightly, and touched her own chest, wishing desperately she could say her name aloud. "I know you can't tell me yours," Kale said gently, "but I'll figure it out. I promise." For a moment, sitting in the moonlight with this broken wolf, who somehow felt like the only real thing in her world, Mira felt almost whole. Then came the sound of boots on stone. Her blood turned to ice. Captain Varro appeared at the top of the garden stairs, flanked by 2 guards, his scarred face twisted in a triumphant sneer. "Well, well," he drawled, descending slowly. "The little mute has been keeping secrets." Mira scrambled to her feet, heart hammering. Kale rose too, backing toward the wall, but there was nowhere to run. The garden was a dead end. Varro's eyes gleamed with malice. "Feeding a rogue is treason, girl. Even a voiceless nobody like you should know that." She tried to sign, to gesture, to explain. His fist caught her across the jaw before she could. The impact sent her sprawling into the dirt, vision sparking white. "Save it," Varro spat. "The Alpha Prince will want to see you both." They dragged her through the castle halls like a criminal, past staring servants and whispering nobles. Kale was shackled in silver-laced iron that burned his wrists, his jaw clenched in silent agony. Mira's mind raced. The Alpha Prince. Heir Davron Thornridge. She'd only seen him from a distance, a figure of shadow and steel, crowned at 19 after single-handedly crushing a rebellion in the Northern Territories. Now 23, he ruled the castle with cold efficiency and colder justice. They called him the Winter Wolf. Merciless, untouchable, absolute. And now she was being thrown at his feet. The throne room was carved from black granite, lit by blue-flamed torches that cast everything in an eerie, frozen light. At its center, seated on a throne of twisted iron and bone, sat Davron. He was younger than she'd imagined, but no less terrifying. His hair was pale gold, almost white, and his eyes were the color of winter ice, sharp, calculating, and utterly devoid of warmth. He didn't move as they dragged her forward. Didn't even blink. Captain Varro shoved her down onto her knees. "My lord, we found this servant feeding the rogue in the eastern gardens. She's been doing it for months." Davron's gaze shifted to her, and Mira felt the full weight of it, like being pinned beneath a glacier. "A servant," he said, his voice low and smooth as frost. "And a mute, I'm told." She kept her eyes on the floor, heart racing. "Look at me." It wasn't a request. Slowly, Mira raised her head. Their eyes met, and something flickered across his face, too quick to read. "Do you understand what you've done?" he asked. She nodded once. "And yet you did it anyway." He leaned forward slightly. "Why?" She couldn't answer. Her throat closed. Her hands trembled. Davron's jaw tightened. "Captain Varro tells me you've shown unusual compassion for this rogue, that you've risked your life repeatedly to keep him alive." She didn't deny it. "Perhaps," Davron said slowly, rising from his throne, "you don't understand the law. Perhaps you think your silence excuses you from consequence." He descended the steps toward her, each footfall echoing like a death knell. "Let me clarify," he continued, stopping directly in front of her. "Rogues are executed. Those who aid them are punished publicly. There are no exceptions." Mira's breath caught. Davron looked past her to Kale, who was being held at sword point. "You wanted to save him? Then watch what mercy earns in this court." He turned to Varro. "Bring them both to the judgment circle at dawn. Let the court see what happens when compassion becomes treason." Mira's world tilted. Kale would die. Because of her. Because she couldn't stay away. Because something inside her had screamed that he mattered. And then Davron's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts, quiet and cold. "Strip her of her post. Chain her beside him. And if she tries to run..." He leaned down, his face level with hers, ice-blue eyes boring into her soul. "I'll make sure she watches him burn slowly." The guards hauled her to her feet, and as they dragged her away, Mira felt something crack inside her chest. Not despair. Rage. A furious, burning, howling rage that had no voice. Not yet. Chapter 2. The judgment circle had never felt so silent. It stood in the center of Thornridge's main courtyard, a raised platform of ancient stone where justice, or what passed for it, was delivered under the open sky. Hundreds of wolves gathered in a slow, murmuring tide. Nobles in fur-lined cloaks, soldiers in polished armor, servants pressed against the outer walls. All of them had come to watch her kneel. Mira stood at the circle's edge, wrists bound in silver-threaded cord that burned against her skin. Her jaw still ached from Varro's strike, and her legs trembled beneath her, but she kept her chin lifted. She would not cower. Not here. Not now. Beside her, Kale was barely standing. The silver shackles had seared deep wounds into his wrists, and his face was pale with pain. But his amber eyes burned with a fury that matched her own. "I'm sorry," he whispered, so quiet only she could hear. "This is my fault. If I'd just stayed hidden." Mira turned her head sharply and stared at him until he stopped talking. "No," her eyes said. "This was never your fault." Above them, on the high balcony overlooking the circle, Davron appeared. The crowd fell silent immediately. He wore no crown today, only black leather armor trimmed with wolf fur, his pale hair pulled back from his face. He looked like a weapon forged in ice, and when he spoke, his voice carried across the courtyard like the toll of a bell. "This court has stood for 300 years, he began. "Built on law, built on order, built on the understanding that chaos, no matter how small, must be rooted out before it spreads." Mira's heart hammered against her ribs. "Before you stands a servant," Davron continued, "who chose compassion over duty, who fed a rogue, a wolf cast out by his own pack, knowing the law forbids it, knowing the consequences." He descended the stairs slowly, each step deliberate. Some of you may think her actions were kind, noble even. He reached the circle's edge and stopped, ice-blue eyes sweeping over the crowd. But kindness without wisdom is just another word for weakness. And weakness has no place in this court. Varro stepped forward, dragging Kale toward the execution stone at the circle's center, a flat slab of obsidian carved with ancient runes. No. The word tried to claw its way out of Mira's throat, but it died there, trapped behind the curse that had stolen her voice years ago. She lurched forward, but the guards yanked her back, forcing her to her knees on the cold stone. Davron turned to look at her then, and for just a moment, something unreadable flickered in his gaze. "Kneel," he said quietly, "and watch what your mercy has earned." The executioner stepped forward, a massive wolf with a ceremonial blade of blackened steel. The crowd pressed closer, hungry for the spectacle. But Mira couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Her entire world had narrowed to Kale's face, terrified but defiant, and the blade rising in the executioner's hand. "No, no, no." The word screamed inside her, louder than anything she'd ever felt. It clawed at her chest, tore at her throat, demanded to be heard. And then something inside her broke. Not shattered, broke open. A pulse of pure silver light exploded outward from her body, so bright it turned the courtyard into a flash of daylight. The guards flew backward. The execution stone cracked straight down the middle. The silver cords binding her wrists disintegrated into ash. Mira gasped, her body convulsing as something ancient and primal surged through her veins like molten starlight. Her bones cracked. Her skin burned. Her vision blurred and sharpened all at once. And then she was no longer kneeling. She was standing on 4 legs, her body transformed into a wolf unlike any Thornridge had ever seen. Her fur was midnight black with a single silver stripe running from her brow to her tail. Her eyes glowed with lunar fire, white gold and impossibly bright. And across her shoulders, shimmering like living light, was a mark no one had seen in over 2 centuries. The crescent crest, the sign of the Moon Seers. The courtyard fell into stunned, breathless silence. Someone whispered, "Impossible." Another dropped to their knees. And then more followed. One by one, wolves across the courtyard bowed, not in fear, but in recognition. In awe. Even the executioner stepped back, blade lowering. Davron stood frozen at the circle's edge, his expression unreadable. But slowly, so slowly it seemed to defy belief, he tilted his head forward in the faintest gesture of acknowledgement. Not submission, not obedience, but something deeper, something older. Respect. Mira shifted back, her body trembling as she returned to human form. She collapsed onto her hands and knees, gasping for air, her mind reeling. What just happened? Kale stared at her, shackles forgotten, his amber eyes wide with shock and something that looked like relief. "You're one of them," he breathed. "You're a Moon Seer. I knew it. I knew you were." Silence. Davron's voice cut through the courtyard like a blade. He crossed the circle in 3 strides and knelt before Mira, his face level with hers. Up close, she could see the conflict warring behind his icy exterior. Disbelief, fascination, and something almost like fear. "How long have you known?" he asked quietly. She shook her head. "I didn't." "You didn't know." His jaw clenched. "Impossible." The Moon Seer bloodline was destroyed during the purge. Every last one of them was hunted down and... He stopped abruptly, his eyes narrowing as realization dawned. Unless... He reached out slowly and brushed a strand of her silver-streaked hair away from her face. "Unless someone hid you, cursed you to forget, silenced you so you couldn't call for help." Mira's breath hitched. Davron stood, his expression hardening. "Captain Varro, release the rogue." "My lord," Varro sputtered. "But the law," Davron said coldly, "was written when Moon Seers still walked among us. And according to that law, anyone who harms a seer, or their chosen companions, forfeits their life." Varro went pale. Davron's gaze swept over the crowd. "She will be taken to the high tower. No one touches her. No one questions her. And no one," his voice dropped to a lethal whisper, "speaks of what happened here until I give the order." He turned back to Mira, offering his hand. She stared at it, then at him, her mind spinning. "You're not a servant anymore," he said quietly. "Whatever you are, whatever you were meant to be, you're under my protection now." "Why?" her eyes asked. His expression flickered, just for a moment, and she saw something beneath the ice. Something raw. Because if you're truly a Moon Seer, he said, voice barely audible, then you're the only one who can stop what's coming. What's coming? Cale asked hoarsely. Davron didn't answer. He simply helped Mira to her feet and gestured to his guards. Take them both to the tower. Post sentries at every entrance. And send for the archivists. As they led her away, Mira glanced back at the courtyard one last time. The execution stone lay split in two. The crowd still knelt. And high above, carved into the castle's ancient walls, a symbol began to glow, faint but unmistakable. The same crescent crest that now marked her shoulders. Far below the castle, in the forgotten catacombs where even the bravest wolves refused to tread, something stirred. A figure cloaked in shadow opened eyes that burned like dying stars. She's awake, it whispered. And the darkness smiled. Chapter 3. The high tower was nothing like the servants' quarters. Where Mira had spent her life sleeping on straw mattresses in cramped stone cells, this chamber was vast and warm, with tapestries depicting ancient wolf packs running beneath crescent moons. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting golden light across polished wooden floors. But she barely noticed any of it. She sat on the edge of the bed, still trembling, her hands clenched in her lap as she tried to process what had just happened. She'd shifted. In front of everyone. After 17 years of believing she was human, or at least something less than wolf. Her body had exploded into a form she didn't recognize, marked with symbols she'd never seen before. Moon Seer. The words echoed in her mind like a half-remembered dream. Cale sat across from her in a carved wooden chair, his wrists freshly bandaged by the castle healer. He'd been silent since they'd arrived, but his amber eyes hadn't left her face. You really didn't know, he said finally. Mira shook her head. Not even a suspicion? A feeling? Another shake. Cale leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Mira, if that's even your real name, Moon Seers don't just disappear. They were systematically hunted during the purge 50 years ago. Every family, every child, every record burned. She looked up at him, her eyes asking the question her voice couldn't. Why? Because they were too powerful, he said quietly. They could see the future, bend moonlight into weapons. Command other wolves without touching them. The ruling packs feared them, so they destroyed them. Mira's stomach twisted. But if you survived, Cale's voice dropped to a whisper. Someone very powerful must have hidden you, and someone even more powerful cursed you to make sure you'd never remember who you really were. Before Mira could react, the chamber door opened. Davron entered, followed by an elderly woman draped in gray robes, her face lined with age, but her silver eyes sharp as broken glass. This is Archon Isla, Davron said. She's the last living scholar of the Moon Seer histories. If anyone can explain what you are, it's her. Isla approached slowly, studying Mira with an intensity that made her want to shrink back. But she forced herself to stay still. The old woman circled her once, then twice, muttering under her breath. Finally, she stopped and placed a withered hand on Mira's shoulder. The moment their skin touched, Mira's vision exploded with images. A woman with silver-streaked hair, screaming as flames consumed a tower. A baby wrapped in moonlight, hidden in a charred basket. A man with hollow eyes whispering a curse. Forget. 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 Mira gasped and jerked away, her heart racing. Isla nodded slowly. She is Seer-born. No question. The mark on her shoulders is authentic. The crescent crest of the Ashenvale line, one of the oldest and most powerful Seer families. Davron's expression darkened. Ashenvale was wiped out completely during the purge. There were no survivors. Apparently, Isla said dryly, there was one. She turned back to Mira. Your true name was likely erased along with your voice. The curse that silenced you wasn't just about speech. It was about identity. They tried to unmake you. Cale stood abruptly. Who? Who would do that? Isla's gaze flicked to Davron. You already know the answer, my lord. Davron's jaw clenched. The Council of Elders. A heavy silence fell over the room. The same council that currently advises you, Isla continued. The same council that led the purge. And the same council that will do everything in their power to kill her the moment they learn she's alive. Mira's blood turned to ice. Davron crossed his arms, his face unreadable. Then we don't tell them. My lord. I said we don't tell them. His voice was steel. She stays here under my protection until we figure out what's happening and why. Isla raised an eyebrow. And when they demand to know why you spared a rogue and a nameless servant, I'll tell them the truth. Davron's ice-blue eyes locked onto Mira. That she's not a servant. She's a ward of the crown. And anyone who questions that answers to me. Cale blinked. You're risking your entire position for her. Why? For a long moment, Davron said nothing. Then quietly. Because 17 years ago, my father led the purge. And I've spent every day since trying to undo the damage he caused. Mira stared at him, her mind reeling. If the Seers return, Davron continued, maybe this kingdom can finally heal. But only if she survives long enough to remember who she is. He turned toward the door. Isla, teach her everything you know. Cale, you stay with her. If anyone tries to enter this tower without my permission. They won't, Cale said firmly. Davron nodded once, then left without another word. The door closed behind him, and Isla let out a long breath. That boy, she muttered, is going to get himself killed. Mira stood slowly and crossed to the window. Below, the courtyard was still buzzing with activity. Nobles whispering in clusters, guards patrolling in tight formations. And somewhere in that castle, people who wanted her dead were already planning their next move. She pressed her hand against the cold glass, and for the first time since the shift, she felt it again, that burning presence just beneath her skin. The wolf, the power, the truth she'd been denied her entire life. Cale appeared beside her. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I'm glad you saved me. Even if it means we're both in danger now. Mira glanced at him, then back at the courtyard. She thought about the woman in the vision, the fire, the curse, and she made a silent vow. I will remember. I will find out who I was, and I will make them answer for what they took from me. That night, while Mira slept fitfully, Davron stood alone in his private study, staring at an old portrait on the wall. It showed his father, the former alpha, cold and proud, standing beside a burning pyre. And if you looked closely, you could see small figures in the flames. Davron's hands clenched into fists. I'm sorry, he whispered to the ghosts in the fire, but I'm going to fix this, even if it destroys me. Somewhere deep beneath the castle, the shadow-cloaked figure rose from its throne of bone. The girl remembers nothing, it hissed, but the wolf inside her does. And soon, she will lead us straight to the heart of what was lost. It smiled. Let the winter wolf play protector. When the time comes, he will hand her to us willingly. Chapter 4. The library of Thornridge Castle was a labyrinth of stone and shadow. Built into the castle's oldest wing, it stretched across 3 floors connected by spiral staircases worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. Shelves carved directly into the rock walls held volumes bound in leather and iron, their spines etched with titles in languages most wolves had forgotten. Mira stood at its center, overwhelmed. Archon Islam moved through the stacks with practiced ease, her gnarled fingers trailing across book spines as she muttered to herself. Ashenvale lineage, moon cycles, transformation triggers. Cale leaned against a reading table nearby, arms crossed, watching Mira with a mixture of concern and curiosity. You don't have to do this all at once, he said quietly. Learning who you were, it can wait. Mira shook her head firmly. She'd spent 17 years in the dark. She wasn't waiting another day. Stubborn, Cale muttered, but there was warmth in his voice. Fine, but if you start feeling overwhelmed. She won't, Isla interrupted, returning with an armful of books that looked ready to crumble into dust. She dropped them onto the table with a heavy thud. Seers are built for this. Their minds can hold more than ordinary wolves. It's why they were feared. She opened the first volume, revealing pages covered in intricate diagrams. Wolf forms with glowing symbols, lunar charts, anatomical drawings of shifting patterns. The Ashenvale line, Isla began, was unique among seers. While other families specialized in prophecy or combat magic, the Ashenvales were truth speakers. Mira leaned closer, her eyes scanning the illustrations. They could compel honesty with a glance, see through illusions, and most dangerously, Isla tapped a diagram showing a wolf with blazing eyes. They could strip curses from other wolves, no matter how old or powerful. Cale straightened. That's why they were targeted during the purge. Precisely. Isla turned the page. The Council of Elders had built their power on secrets and lies. The Ashenvales threatened to expose everything. So they were eliminated first, brutally and completely. Or so they thought, Mira thought, her jaw tightening. Isla's silver eyes fixed on her. Your mother was Lyanna Ashenvale, last matriarch of the line. She tried to flee when the purge began, but they caught her at the northern border. Myra's breath caught. She didn't die immediately, Isla continued, her voice gentle but firm. She had time to hide you. Time to curse you into silence and obscurity, hoping you'd survive long enough to reclaim what was stolen. Tears burned at the corners of Myra's eyes, but she blinked them back. There's something else you need to see. Isla pulled out a smaller book, its cover marked with the crescent crest. This is your mother's journal. It survived the burning because it was spelled to appear blank to anyone without Ashenvale blood. She placed it in Myra's hands. The moment her fingers touched the leather, the pages blazed with silver light. Words appeared, flowing across the parchment in elegant script. To my daughter, if you ever find this, you are stronger than they know. Stronger than I was. The curse I placed on you will break when you are ready, when your rage becomes greater than your fear. When that day comes, remember. Truth is not always kind, but it is always necessary. Use your voice wisely. Use it to shatter the lies that built this kingdom. And forgive me for the years I stole from you. I loved you more than moonlight itself. Lyanna. Myra's hands trembled. She pressed the journal to her chest, feeling the warmth of her mother's magic still lingering in its pages. Cale stepped closer, his voice soft. She saved you. She gave you a chance. Mira nodded, tears finally spilling over. The door to the library burst open. Davron strode in, his expression darker than usual. Behind him came two guards, their faces grim. We have a problem, he said without preamble. Isla closed the books quickly. The council? They've called an emergency session. Davron's jaw clenched. Someone told them about the shift in the courtyard. They're demanding I bring the seer before them for questioning. Myra's heart dropped. You can refuse, Cale said sharply. You're the alpha. Your word is law. Not when the entire council unites against me, Davron replied coldly. If I refuse, they'll declare me compromised. They'll strip my title and execute her anyway. Then we run, Cale insisted. We leave tonight. And go where? Davron's voice was ice. Every pack in the kingdom answers to the council. There's nowhere she can hide that they won't find her. Silence fell over the library. Mira stood slowly, her mind racing. She looked at Davron, then at the journal in her hands. Truth is not always kind, but it is always necessary. She crossed to the table, grabbed a quill, and wrote in swift, angry strokes. I'll go, but on my terms. Davron read it, then met her eyes. What are you thinking? She wrote again. The council built their power on lies. Let's see how they handle the truth. Cale's eyes widened. You want to expose them? In front of everyone. Mira nodded. That's insane, he breathed. They'll kill you before you can speak a word. He stopped, realizing. Unless you can speak. Isla stepped forward, understanding dawning on her face. The curse is breaking. Not completely, but enough. If she faces them with the full power of her bloodline awakened, she could compel them to confess everything, Davron finished, his expression shifting from concern to something darker. Something almost predatory. The entire purge. Every lie. Every murder. It's dangerous, Isla warned. If her power isn't fully restored, the backlash could kill her. Mira picked up the quill again. I'm already dead if I do nothing. Davron studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Then we do this together. But we'll need a plan. The council chamber is warded against magic. Not seer magic, Isla interrupted. Ashenvale truth-speaking bypasses traditional wards. It works on a deeper level, blood and intent. How long do we have? Cale asked. The session is tomorrow at sundown, Davron replied. Which means we have less than a day to prepare. Mira felt the weight of what she was about to do settle over her shoulders. She was going to walk into a room full of wolves who had murdered her entire family, who had cursed her into silence, who wanted nothing more than to see her erased from existence. And she was going to make them tell the truth. The hours passed in a blur of preparation. Isla taught her focusing techniques, ways to channel her power without losing control. Cale stood guard, pacing the library like a caged wolf. And Davron coordinated with his most trusted guards, ensuring at least some protection in the council chamber. As midnight approached, Mira stood alone on the tower balcony, staring up at the twin moons. She felt different now, not just because of the shift, but because of the weight of her mother's words. The knowledge that she wasn't some accident, some broken thing. She was a weapon, forged in secret and waiting to be unleashed. Footsteps approached behind her. Can't sleep. Davron's voice was quiet. She shook her head. He moved to stand beside her, his presence somehow both intimidating and oddly comforting. I meant what I said earlier. About my father. Mira glanced at him. He led the purge personally, Davron continued, his voice hollow. I was 7 years old. I remember watching from the castle windows as they burned the seer villages. I remember asking him why, and he told me it was necessary, that they were dangerous. His hands gripped the balcony railing, knuckles white. For years, I believed him. And then I found the records. The real ones, hidden in his private study. I learned what they'd really done. The families they'd slaughtered. The children they'd killed to prevent future threats. Mira's chest tightened. When I took the throne, Davron said quietly, I swore I would never become him. That I would undo every lie he told, every wrong he committed. But the council, they're still here. Still in power. And I've been too weak to challenge them. He turned to face her, his ice-blue eyes burning with something raw and desperate. So tomorrow, when you face them, don't hold back. Burn them to ash if you have to. Because they don't deserve mercy. And neither does the kingdom they built on blood. Mira stared at him, seeing past the cold exterior for the first time. Seeing the guilt and rage he'd been carrying alone for years. She reached out slowly and touched his hand. He flinched, surprised, but didn't pull away. For a moment, they stood together in silence. Two broken wolves bound by vengeance, and something neither of them had words for yet. Finally, Davron whispered, Don't die tomorrow. Please. Mira squeezed his hand once, then let go. I won't, her eyes promised. Because I have too much left to say. Far below the castle, in the depths of the forgotten catacombs, the shadow stirred again. Tomorrow, it whispered, the girl will speak. And when she does, the gateway will open. Its eyes blazed with hunger. Let her burn the council. Let her reclaim her voice. It only brings us closer to what we truly need. The darkness laughed. The wolves always make it so easy. Chapter 5. The council chamber was a cathedral of cold stone and colder hearts. Circular in design, it rose 3 stories high, with gallery seats carved into the walls where lesser nobles and advisors could observe. At ground level, 13 obsidian thrones formed a semicircle, each occupied by a member of the Elder Council, the wolves who had ruled Thornridge's politics for generations. At the center of the chamber stood a single iron platform, stained dark with the blood of countless accused. Mira was led there in chains. Not the silver-laced bindings that burned shifter flesh, but ordinary iron, a calculated insult. They wanted everyone to see her as nothing more than a criminal servant, not the threat she truly was. Cale walked behind her, also chained, his amber eyes scanning the gallery for threats. Davron entered last, taking his seat on the Alpha's throne, positioned slightly higher than the council's, though the symbolism felt hollow now. The chamber was packed. Every noble family in the region had sent representatives, drawn by rumors of the impossible. A Moon Seer, alive after 50 years. Elder Casimir, the council speaker, rose from his throne. He was ancient, his face a map of wrinkles, but his eyes were sharp as knives. This emergency session has been called to address a matter of grave concern. 3 days ago, in the Judgment Circle, a servant girl allegedly displayed abilities consistent with the Moon Seer bloodline, a bloodline declared extinct after the purge. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Furthermore, Casimir continued, this girl was caught providing aid to a known rogue, a crime punishable by death. Yet our Alpha chose to grant her sanctuary rather than justice. His gaze shifted to Davron. My lord, we respect your authority. But we must ask, why would you protect someone who poses such obvious danger to our kingdom's stability? Davron's expression was carved from ice. Because I choose to value truth over convenience, Elder Casimir. Something this council seems to have forgotten. A dangerous silence fell. Elder Thessa, a silver-haired woman with a serpent smile, spoke next. Truth, my lord? Or sentiment? Perhaps you've been influenced by her abilities. Seers were known for their powers of persuasion. I assure you, Davron replied coldly, my mind is entirely my own. Then prove it, Casimir challenged. Let us question the girl directly. If she is truly a seer, let her demonstrate her powers before this council. And if she cannot, his smile was cruel, then she is simply a witch who must be dealt with accordingly. Mira's heart hammered, but she kept her face neutral. Davron stood. The council may question her. But I warn you, Moon Seers do not lie. If you ask for truth, you may not like what you receive. We'll take that risk, Thessa said smoothly. The chains were removed from Mira's wrists. She stood alone on the platform, feeling hundreds of eyes boring into her. Casimir descended from his throne, circling her slowly. "Tell us your name, girl." Mira opened her mouth, but no sound came. The curse still held, mostly. Casimir's lips curled. "Just as I thought. She cannot even speak. How convenient." But then Mira felt it. The same burning sensation from the courtyard. The rage, the power, the truth demanding to be heard. She closed her eyes and reached deep into that well of moonfire. "Mother," she thought, "help me break what you made." The air in the chamber shifted. The torches flickered. And when Mira opened her mouth again, a voice emerged, cracked, rusty from 17 years of silence, but unmistakably hers. "My name is Mira Ashenvale, daughter of Lyanna, last of my line." The chamber erupted in chaos. Nobles leaped to their feet. Guards reached for weapons. The council members went pale. But Mira wasn't finished. Her eyes began to glow with silver fire, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a weight that made everyone freeze. "And I compel this council to speak only truth in my presence." The words rippled outward like a shockwave. Several elders gasped, clutching their throats as the ancient seer magic took hold. Casimir stumbled backward. "No, you can't. Why was my family killed?" Mira's voice was stronger now, gaining power with each word. "Tell the truth." Casimir's mouth opened against his will. Because you threatened our control. The Ashenvales could expose our corruption, our secret dealings with." He choked, trying to stop himself, but the compulsion was absolute. "With the Shadow Covenant. We made a pact with them 50 years ago. Power in exchange for sacrifice." The gallery exploded with shouts and accusations. Mira turned to Elder Thessa. "What sacrifice?" Thessa's face twisted with fury and terror. "Seer children. We gave them seer children in exchange for dark magic that would strengthen our bloodlines. The purge wasn't about protection, it was about feeding them." Horror washed over the crowd. Davron rose from his throne, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. "You murdered entire families. Children. To make deals with shadow creatures. Your father knew." Casimir spat, the compulsion forcing every word. He approved it. He wanted the power as much as we did. The words hit Davron like a physical blow. But Mira wasn't done. She could feel something else lurking beneath the surface, something the elders were still desperately trying to hide. "Where are the Shadow Covenant now?" she demanded. Casimir's eyes went wide with genuine fear. "Beneath us. In the catacombs. We've been feeding them prisoners for years, keeping them strong, because if we stop, they'll consume us instead." Thessa finished, the words torn from her throat. "We're trapped. We created this. We can't undo it." The chamber fell into stunned silence. Mira felt sick. The entire kingdom, built on lies and blood sacrifices, balanced on the edge of a darkness that had been growing beneath them for decades. She turned to face the crowd. "You wanted truth. Here it is. This council has been serving monsters while calling themselves protectors. They killed my family not because we were dangerous, but because we could have stopped them." Her voice rose, filled with all the pain and rage she'd carried in silence for 17 years. "And now those monsters are waiting below, growing stronger, and when they finally break free, everyone in this castle will pay for what the council has done." The gallery erupted into pandemonium. Nobles fled for the exits. Guards shouted contradicting orders. The council members tried to escape their thrones, but Davron's personal guard blocked their path. "No one leaves," Davron commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Especially not the council." Casimir lunged for the exit anyway, but Kale intercepted him, slamming the elderly wolf against a pillar. "You killed her family," Kale snarled. "You fed children to monsters. Give me one reason I shouldn't tear your throat out right now." "Because I can still fix this." Casimir gasped. "The pact, it can be broken." The floor beneath them trembled. Then again harder. The torches went out, plunging the chamber into darkness. And from somewhere far below a sound rose. Not a howl, not a scream, but something older and infinitely more terrible. Laughter. When the torches reignited moments later, a figure stood in the center of the chamber where none had been before. Cloaked in shifting shadows, crowned with antlers of bleached bone, eyes burning like dying stars. The creature that had been waiting beneath the castle for 50 years had finally decided to introduce itself. "Well done, little seer," it said, its voice like grinding stone. "You've given me exactly what I needed." Mira backed away, her power suddenly feeling very small. The Shadow King smiled. Your truth has set me free. Chapter 6. The Shadow King moved through the council chamber like smoke given terrible purpose. Where it passed, frost spread across the stone. The torches dimmed, and wolves, even the strongest among them, felt their blood turn cold with primal, instinctive terror. This was not a creature meant to walk the mortal world. Mira stood frozen on the platform, her newfound voice locked in her throat. The power that had felt so strong moments ago now seemed laughably insignificant against the thing standing before her. Davron was the first to react. He drew his blade and leaped from his throne, placing himself between Mira and the creature. Get behind me. Now. But the Shadow King only laughed, a sound like ice cracking over a deep lake. The winter wolf plays hero. How touching. Its burning eyes fixed on Davron. Tell me, princeling, did your father scream when he realized what he'd unleashed? Did he beg for mercy in those final moments? Davron's grip on his sword tightened. My father died of fever. Is that what they told you? The creature's smile widened. No. He came down to the catacombs 3 years ago, desperate to renegotiate our pact. He thought he could contain me, control me. It tilted its head. I ate him slowly. Over weeks. He died screaming your name. The words hit Davron like a hammer. His sword wavered. Lies, he breathed. Truth, the Shadow King countered. Ask your little seer. She can feel it, can't she? The resonance of truth in my words. All eyes turned to Mira. She wanted to deny it. Wanted to tell Davron this monster was trying to manipulate him. But her seer blood burned with recognition. It wasn't lying. Davron's face went pale. For a moment, he looked like he might collapse. Then his expression hardened into something colder and more dangerous than Mira had ever seen. Then I'll finish what he started, Davron said quietly, and send you back to whatever hell spawned you. He lunged. The Shadow King moved faster than anything that size should be able to move. It caught Davron by the throat and lifted him off the ground, slamming him into a pillar hard enough to crack stone. No, Mira screamed, her voice finally breaking free. The Shadow King turned to her, still holding Davron suspended. There it is, that beautiful voice. 50 years I've waited to hear an Ashenvale speak again. It dropped Davron, who crumpled to the ground, gasping. You see, the creature continued, approaching Mira slowly. The elders thought they were so clever. Trade me seer children, feed me prisoners, keep me satisfied and contained. But what they never understood was that I didn't want their scraps. It stopped directly in front of her, towering over her small frame. I wanted you, the last Ashenvale, the only one whose voice could open the gateway. Mira's blood turned to ice. What gateway? The one your mother died protecting. The Shadow King gestured, and the floor of the chamber began to crack. Symbols blazed to life, ancient runes carved into the foundation stones, hidden for decades under layers of newer construction. This entire castle was built on a seal, a prison, and only Ashenvale truth-speaking can break it. Realization hit Mira like a physical blow. You wanted me to speak. You wanted me to break the curse. Every word you spoke today weakened the seal. The creature's smile was terrible, and that final scream, that beautiful rage-filled scream, shattered it completely. The floor split open. Darkness poured out. Not natural shadow, but something alive and hungry. It spread across the chamber floor like oil, and where it touched wolves, they screamed and collapsed, their bodies withering as the darkness fed. Panic erupted. Nobles trampled each other, fleeing for the exits. Guards tried to form defensive lines, but the shadow simply flowed around them, seeking the weakest, the most afraid. Kale grabbed Mira's arm. We have to go. Now. But Mira couldn't move. She watched the darkness spreading, knowing she was responsible. Her voice, her truth. She'd given this monster exactly what it needed. This is my fault, she whispered. No. Davron had pulled himself upright, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. This is the council's fault. They made the pact. They fed it. You just forced them to admit it. And now everyone dies because I couldn't stay silent, Mira said, her voice breaking. The Shadow King circled them, amused. Oh, they don't all have to die. I'm not unreasonable. Give me what I truly want, and I'll spare the rest. What do you want? Davron demanded. The creature's eyes locked on Mira. Her voice. Permanently. I want to consume it, absorb it, make its power mine. With an Ashenvale's truth speaking, I could walk freely between worlds. Command any creature. Remake reality itself. Never, Kale snarled. Then watch them burn. The Shadow King raised its hand, and the darkness surged forward, engulfing 2 guards who had tried to attack it. Their screams cut off abruptly. Mira's mind raced. There had to be another way. Some weakness, some. And then she remembered. Her mother's journal. The last page. Truth is not always kind, but it is always necessary. Truth could be a weapon. Not just against liars, but against anything that existed through deception and fear. I'll make you a deal, Mira said, her voice steady despite the terror coursing through her. Mira, no, Davron started. I'll give you my voice, she continued. But first, you have to answer 3 questions. Truthfully. No tricks, no riddles. Just truth. The Shadow King paused, intrigued. 3 questions. That's all I ask. Answer them, and I'll surrender my voice willingly. It'll be more powerful that way anyway, given freely rather than taken. The creature considered this. Very well. 3 questions. But if you refuse the bargain afterward, I kill everyone in this castle. Slowly. Mira nodded. Agreed. What are you doing? Kale hissed. She ignored him, focusing entirely on the Shadow King. First question. What are you truly afraid of? The creature's smile faltered. The compulsion of Ashenvale truth-speaking forced its answer. Light. Pure, untainted light. Not moonlight, not firelight, starlight. The first light. It burns what I am. Good. A weakness. Second question. How were you created? The Shadow King's expression twisted with anger, but it couldn't stop the words. I was made. Forged from the fears of wolves who didn't want to face death. I am what remains when courage fails. When honor breaks. When wolves choose survival over sacrifice. Understanding crystallized in Mira's mind. It wasn't an ancient evil. It was a consequence. A manifestation of the council's cowardice. Final question, she said, her voice ringing clear. Can you be unmade? The Shadow King tried to resist. Its form flickered, destabilized by the compulsion. But Ashenvale power was absolute when it came to truth. Yes, it finally gasped. If one with my power turned that power inward. If I chose to end myself. But I never would. Self-destruction is against my nature. Mira smiled grimly. What if I made you? The creature's eyes widened. That's not possible. You can't compel. Can I? Mira's eyes blazed silver white. You're made of lies and fear. And I speak truth. You said it yourself. I could command any creature. So I'm commanding you now. Unmake yourself. The Shadow King screamed. Its form began to unravel, shadows peeling away like burning paper. No, this isn't, you can't. I can, Mira said, her voice growing stronger. Because you told me the truth. You gave me the weapon I needed. And now I'm using it. The darkness that had been spreading across the chamber began to reverse, flowing back toward its source. Wolves who had fallen began to breathe again. The symbols on the floor dimmed. The seal. Archon Isla's voice rang out from the gallery. She's restoring it. Davron stared at Mira in awe. The Shadow King collapsed to its knees, its form shrinking, dissolving. Clever girl, it rasped. Your mother would be proud. And terrified. Why terrified? Mira asked. With its last breath, the creature smiled. Because now you know what you're capable of. And power like that, it always has a price. Then it was gone. Simply ceased to exist. Pulled apart by its own nature turned against itself. The chamber fell silent except for the sound of wolves breathing heavily, trying to process what they'd just witnessed. Mira swayed on her feet. The effort of compelling something that powerful had nearly broken her. Kale caught her before she fell. You did it, he whispered. You actually did it. But Mira wasn't celebrating. She stared at the spot where the Shadow King had dissolved, its final words echoing in her mind. Power like that always has a price. What had she just unleashed in herself? Davron approached slowly, his expression unreadable. You saved us. Everyone in this castle. By becoming the thing they feared, Mira replied quietly. A seer who can compel anything to obey. Even monsters. Even elders who deserve justice, Davron said, gesturing to where the council members cowered in their thrones, suddenly very aware of how powerless they were against her. Mira looked at them. These wolves who had murdered her family, made pacts with darkness, sacrificed children for power. And she realized Davron was right. This wasn't over. The Shadow King was gone, but the corruption that created it remained. What happens now? Kale asked. Mira straightened, her voice clear and strong. Now we finish what I started. We clean this castle of every lie, every secret, every crime. She turned to face the council. And we start with them. Elder Casimir tried to flee, but found his body frozen by her will. The last Ashenvale had found her voice. And the kingdom of Thornridge would never be the same. Chapter 7. The purge of Thornridge's council took 3 days. Not a violent purge, though many in the castle would have preferred one. No, this was something far more devastating. Truth laid bare under moonlight, with no shadows left to hide in. Mira stood in the great hall each morning as the sun rose, compelling elder after elder to confess their crimes before the assembled court. Every deal made with darkness. Every innocent sacrificed. Every lie told to maintain power. Some wept. Some raged. Some simply stared ahead with hollow eyes as their carefully constructed legacies crumbled to ash. By the 3rd day, the Council of Elders no longer existed. Davron had stripped them of their titles, their lands, their authority. Those who had directly participated in the murders were locked in the castle's deepest cells, awaiting judgment from a newly formed court. One that would include representatives from every pack, not just the elite bloodlines. Those who had merely been complicit were exiled, sent to the borderlands with nothing but the clothes on their backs. And through it all, Mira's voice never wavered. But the cost was beginning to show. She stood now in her tower chamber, staring at her reflection in the polished silver mirror. Her face was gaunt, shadows deep beneath her eyes. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from exhaustion. Using her power, this extensively was burning through her like wildfire through dry grass. "You need to rest," Kale said from the doorway. He'd been her constant shadow these past days, watching her with growing concern. "There's still work to do," Mira replied, her voice hoarse. "The council's records, we've only gone through half of them. There could be more hidden crimes, more. There will always be more," Kale interrupted gently. "But if you burn yourself out now, you won't be here to see justice through." Mira turned to face him. "I can't stop. Not yet. Not when." "When what?" He stepped closer. "When you've punished everyone. When you've made the entire kingdom pay for what they did to your family." His words struck deeper than he probably intended. "That's not what this is about," she said defensively. "Isn't it?" Kale's amber eyes were kind but unflinching. "Mira, I understand. Gods know I understand wanting revenge. But you're not just seeking justice anymore. You're drowning in it." She wanted to argue, to insist he was wrong. But when she looked back at her reflection, she saw what he saw. Not a guardian of truth, but someone consumed by it, wielding it like a weapon without thought for the wounds it left behind. Even righteous ones. A knock at the door interrupted them. "Come in," Mira called. Davron entered, and Mira was struck by how different he looked from 3 days ago. The cold, untouchable alpha prince had been replaced by someone rawer, more human. His father's betrayal had cracked something in him. But instead of shattering, he'd begun to rebuild. "The new court convenes tomorrow," he said. "They'll need you there to verify testimonies." Mira nodded. "I'll be ready. Will you?" Davron's ice-blue eyes studied her carefully. "You look like you haven't slept since this began." "I'm fine." "You're lying." His voice was gentle. "And you're terrible at it, which I suppose is the point of being a seer." Despite everything, Mira felt her lips twitch toward a smile. Davron crossed to the window, gazing out over the castle grounds. "I've been thinking about what the Shadow King said. About power having a price." Mira tensed. "Your gift," Davron continued. "It's incredible. Necessary. But it's also terrifying, even to those who benefit from it. The nobles are already whispering. Some are grateful, yes. But others fear me," Mira finished quietly. "Fear what you represent," Davron corrected. "A power that can't be controlled, can't be bargained with, can't be escaped. They're wondering, if you can compel elders and monsters, what's to stop you from compelling them?" The question hung heavy in the air. "I would never," Mira began. "I know that," Davron said firmly. "But they don't. Not yet. And fear breeds desperation. Desperate wolves do dangerous things." Kale's expression darkened. "You think someone will try to kill her?" "I think someone will try," Davron replied. "Which is why I've doubled the tower guard and forbidden anyone except myself, you, and Archon Isla from entering this wing." "You can't protect me forever," Mira said. "No," Davron agreed. "But I can protect you long enough for the kingdom to understand that you're not their enemy. That you're trying to heal what was broken." He turned to face her fully. That's why I need you at the court proceedings tomorrow. Not to compel more confessions. We have enough for 100 trials. But to show them you're more than just a weapon. That you're a wolf trying to do right by her people. Mira absorbed this, understanding the wisdom in his words, even as exhaustion pulled at her bones. There's something else, Davron said, his voice dropping lower. Archon Isla found something in your mother's journal. Something she thinks you need to see. 20 minutes later, the three of them stood in Isla's study. A cluttered space filled with ancient texts and artifacts that smelled of old paper and dried herbs. The elderly scholar looked more tired than Mira had ever seen her. I've been translating the coded sections of Lyanna's journal, Isla said. Most of it is what we expected, records of the purge, names of those who participated, instructions for hiding you. She paused, her silver eyes troubled. But there's a final entry, written the night before she died. Isla opened the journal to the last page, where new words had appeared in Lyanna's flowing script. If you're reading this, my daughter, then you've survived. You've found your voice, and you've likely used it to bring justice to those who wronged us. I am proud beyond words. But I must warn you, the Ashenvale gift is not just power, it is burden. Every truth you speak, every compulsion you make, takes something from you. A piece of your soul, worn away like stone under water. Your grandmother lasted 30 years before the gift consumed her entirely. She became truth itself, unable to lie, unable to remain silent, unable to live among wolves who needed their small mercies and kind deceptions. She died alone, speaking truths no one wanted to hear. I pray you find balance where we could not. Use your voice wisely. Speak truth, yes, but know when silence is its own form of mercy. Your loving mother. The room fell silent. Mira felt something cold settle in her chest. How long do I have? Isla shook her head. There's no way to know. Your grandmother was exceptionally powerful. She used her gift constantly. Your mother was more cautious. She lasted longer. And me? Mira asked. I've been using it nonstop for 3 days. Then you need to stop, Kale said firmly. Now, before it's too late. But Mira thought about the trials tomorrow. The wolves still awaiting judgment. The corruption that still needed to be rooted out. I can't, she whispered. There's too much at stake. Your life is at stake, Davron said quietly. And if you burn yourself out, if you become like your grandmother, unable to exist among us, then everything you've fought for will be lost anyway. He stepped closer, his voice gentle but unyielding. The kingdom needs you, Mira, but it needs you whole. Not as a weapon, not as some untouchable force of truth. As a wolf, as a person. Mira looked between the three of them, Kale, Davron, Isla, and saw the same concern reflected in each face. They were right. She knew they were right. But the weight of justice, the hunger for truth, the need to make things right, it was almost impossible to resist. I'll attend the trials tomorrow, she said finally, but only as a witness, not as an inquisitor. I'll let the new court make its judgments without compelling anyone. And after that? Isla asked. After that, Mira took a deep breath. I'll rest. I'll learn to use my gift more carefully. And I'll try to remember that I'm not just my power. Davron nodded, something like relief crossing his face. Good, because Thornridge needs its seer. But he caught himself. We need Mira. The slip didn't go unnoticed by anyone in the room. That night, unable to sleep, Mira climbed to the highest tower of the castle, a place where guards rarely patrolled and the wind carried away all sound. She wasn't alone for long. Davron found her there, as if drawn by instinct. Can't rest either? He asked, settling beside her on the stone parapet. Too many thoughts, Mira admitted. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the twin moons rise over the distant mountains. My father used to bring me here, Davron said eventually. When I was young, before the purge, he'd tell me stories about the old days, when seers and warriors ruled together, when balance meant something. His voice grew bitter. I thought they were just stories, lessons about honor and courage. I didn't know he was mourning what he'd destroyed. Mira glanced at him. Do you think he regretted it? The Shadow King said he died screaming my name, Davron replied quietly. So yes, I think in the end, he regretted everything. But by then it was too late. Is it too late for us? Mira asked. Can we actually fix what they broke? Davron turned to look at her, and in the moonlight, his ice-blue eyes were luminous. With you here, I think we have a chance. A real one. Something passed between them then, an understanding, a connection deeper than words. Davron, Mira said softly, what you said earlier, in Isla's study. You started to say something. He tensed slightly. Did I? You said Thornridge needs its seer. But and then you stopped. For a long moment he didn't respond. Then, I was going to say that I need you, not as a seer, not as a weapon or a tool, just as Mira. Her heart stuttered. I know it's complicated, he continued quickly. I'm the Alpha. You're still discovering who you are. And everything is chaos right now. But I wanted you to know. In case the worst happens. In case your power does consume you, or someone does try to hurt you, or... Mira reached out and took his hand, silencing him. I need you too, she said simply. And for the first time since finding her voice, she felt truly heard. Far below, in the newly secured catacombs, something stirred in the darkness. The Shadow King was gone. The seal was restored. But darkness, once invited in, never truly leaves. It simply waits. And watches. And plans. Chapter 8. The new court convened in what had once been the council's private chamber. A deliberate choice by Davron to symbolize the transfer of power from the corrupt elite to the people they'd failed. The obsidian thrones had been removed. In their place sat a circular table carved from ironwood, surrounded by 23 chairs. One for each major pack in the kingdom, plus representatives from the rogues, the healers' guild, and the merchant clans. It was messy, chaotic. Voices overlapped as wolves who'd never held power before struggled to understand their new authority. But it was real. Mira sat in the observer's gallery with Kale, watching as Davron presided over the first session. He'd insisted she not take an active role, both to protect her and to show the kingdom this new court could function without seer compulsion. The first case, Davron announced, his voice carrying across the chamber, concerns Elder Casimir and Elder Thessa. They stand accused of orchestrating the deaths of 17 seer families during the purge and of maintaining a pact with shadow entities through ritual sacrifice. The two former elders were brought forward in chains. Gone was their aristocratic bearing. Now they looked like what they truly were, old wolves who'd lived too long on borrowed power. How do you plead? Asked Marin Swiftpaw, a rogue representative who'd been chosen as the court's first speaker. We were following orders, Casimir said, his voice thin. The previous Alpha commanded. We've already established the previous Alpha's guilt, Marin interrupted. This court wants to know. Did you willingly participate in these crimes? Casimir hesitated, clearly weighing his options. Without Mira's compulsion, he could lie. But then Thessa spoke, her voice weary. Yes, we participated willingly. We thought we were preserving the kingdom's stability. We were wrong. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Casimir stared at her in horror. What are you doing? Telling the truth, Thessa replied. Because even if the seer doesn't compel it, I'm tired of lying. Tired of carrying this weight. She turned to face the court. We murdered innocents. We made pacts with darkness. We sacrificed children. And we did it knowingly, believing our positions of power justified any action. She looked up at the gallery, directly at Mira. I'm sorry. It's inadequate and far too late, but I'm sorry for what we took from you. Mira felt Kale's hand find hers, squeezing gently. The court deliberated for 3 hours. When they reconvened, Marin stood. The court finds both accused guilty of crimes against the kingdom and against the natural order. The sentence is exile to the barren territories, stripped of name and pack affiliation. You will live out your remaining years as what you made others, nothing. It was harsh but not cruel. Not execution, but erasure. Fitting for wolves who'd tried to erase an entire bloodline. As the guards led them away, Thessa paused beside Mira's seat. Your mother, she said quietly. She fought to the very end. Made them work for every death. I wanted you to know that. Then she was gone. Over the next week, the trials continued. Each case heard. Each judgment made without seer interference. Some sentences were harsh. Some were merciful. But all of them were chosen by wolves who understood the weight of justice rather than wielding it carelessly. And slowly, Mira began to feel something she hadn't expected. Hope. But not everyone was pleased with the new order. Lord Fenric, an aging wolf from the Eastern Territories, cornered Davron after one session. Mira watched from a distance, noting the tension in the exchange. This chaos you call justice, Fenric snarled. It's destroying everything we built. Everything you built on corpses, Davron replied coldly. Order requires sacrifice. The seers understood that better than anyone. They knew their place in the hierarchy. This girl you've elevated, she's disrupting the natural balance. The natural balance, Kale interrupted, appearing beside them, involved feeding children to shadow monsters. If that's your idea of order, my lord, then chaos is an improvement. Fenric's face purpled with rage, but before he could respond, Mira stepped forward. Lord Fenric, she said, her voice calm, I understand change is difficult, especially when you've benefited from the old system. You understand nothing, Fenric spat. You're a child playing with power you can't control. Perhaps, Mira acknowledged. But I'm not the one who spent 50 years enabling atrocities because they were comfortable. So between your experience and my ignorance, I'll choose ignorance with a conscience. Fenric opened his mouth to retort, but found himself suddenly unable to speak. Not from compulsion, but from the simple truth of her words. He stormed away instead, several other traditionalist nobles following in his wake. That was restrained of you, Davron said with a slight smile. You could have compelled him to apologize. I could have, Mira agreed. But I'm trying to use my power less. And honestly, some wolves need to learn lessons the hard way. That night, Kale found Mira in the library, poring over old territorial maps. What are you looking for? He asked. Patterns, Mira replied. The seers weren't just scattered randomly across the kingdom during the purge. They were concentrated in specific areas, places with old magic, natural power sources. She pointed to several marked locations. Here, and here. All sites of major seer settlements. All completely destroyed. You think there's something at these locations? Kale asked, leaning over the map. I think my ancestors chose these places for a reason. And I think if we can figure out why, we might understand more about what we're supposed to do with this power. Kale studied the map thoughtfully. That's Silverpine Grove, the Weeping Cliffs, and the Moonwell Temple. His voice caught on the last name. Mira looked up. You know it. Everyone knows it, Kale said quietly. It's where the first wolves are said to have learned to shift, where the barrier between our world and the spirit realm is thinnest. And it's where the largest seer community was destroyed, Mira added. 50 families, burned in a single night. Kale met her eyes. You want to go there? It wasn't a question. I need to understand what we were, Mira said. What we're meant to be. The power is growing stronger every day, and without knowing how to control it properly. You could become like your grandmother, Kale finished. Consumed by truth. Mira nodded. Then we go, Kale said firmly. When? The trials will be finished in 3 days. After that, you're not going anywhere without me. Davron's voice came from the library entrance. He stepped into the lamplight, his expression unreadable. How long have you been listening? Mira asked. Long enough to know you're planning something dangerous without telling me, Davron replied, crossing to stand beside them. The Moonwell Temple is in the disputed lands. No pack claims it, which means no pack protects it, which also means no one will stop us from exploring it, Mira countered. No one except the things that live there now, Davron said. The temple's been abandoned for 50 years. Who knows what's moved into that void? All the more reason to investigate, Mira insisted. If something dark has taken root in a place of such concentrated power, then it needs to be dealt with, Davron finished. I agree, which is why I'm coming with you. Kale raised an eyebrow. Can the Alpha Prince really abandon his court for an expedition into dangerous territory? The Alpha Prince, Davron said, can delegate, and needs to ensure the last Moon Seer doesn't get herself killed chasing answers. His eyes met Mira's, and she saw the concern beneath the commanding exterior. Besides, he added more softly, you said yourself that the seers and warriors once ruled together. Maybe it's time we remembered what that partnership looked like. 3 days later, the final trial concluded. The last of the corrupt officials were sentenced, and the new court was officially established as the kingdom's primary governing body. It wasn't perfect. There were still tensions, still disagreements, still wolves who resented the changes. But it was legitimate, and that was a start. As Mira prepared for the journey to Moonwell Temple, Archon Isla pulled her aside. I've been researching your family's history, the old scholar said, and I found something troubling. She handed Mira a brittle piece of parchment covered in ancient script. This is from your great-grandmother's journal. It describes what happened the last time an Ashenvale visited the Moonwell Temple. Mira read the faded words, her blood slowly turning cold. The temple showed her the truth of what we are. Not just speakers of truth, but channels for it. The temple holds the voice of the first wolf, the original truth from which all shifting flows. She tried to listen, tried to understand, and the truth consumed her. She walked into the moonwell itself and never emerged. Some say she became the water. Others say she simply ceased to be. But I know this. The temple doesn't answer questions. It poses them. And not every wolf is strong enough to hear the answers. Isla's silver eyes were grave. Are you sure you want to do this? Mira folded the parchment carefully. I have to know what I am, what I'm becoming. Even if the answer destroys you? Even then, Mira said quietly. Because if I don't understand my power, it will destroy me anyway. At least this way, I'll know the truth. Isla nodded slowly. Then take this. She pressed a small silver pendant into Mira's palm. A crescent moon encircling a star. It belonged to your mother. She wore it the day she hid you. It's spelled to ground you, keep you tethered to the mortal world even when the truth tries to pull you elsewhere. Mira clasped the pendant around her neck, feeling its gentle warmth against her skin. Thank you, she whispered. Come back alive, Isla said. The kingdom has just found its seer. It would be a shame to lose you so soon. As dawn broke over Thornridge Castle, 3 wolves stood at the eastern gate. Mira, Kale, and Davron. They carried light provisions, weapons, and the weight of questions that might not have answers. Last chance to reconsider, Davron said, though his pack supplies suggested he didn't expect anyone to take the offer. I've spent my whole life not knowing who I am, Mira replied. I'm done living in that darkness. Kale simply grinned. Where she goes, I go. Someone has to keep you two from killing each other. Davron's lips twitched toward a smile. Fair point. They set out as the sun climbed higher, leaving the castle, and safety behind. None of them noticed the figure watching from the highest tower. Lord Fenric lowered his spyglass, his expression calculating. So the seer leaves her fortress, he murmured. How convenient. He turned to the shadows behind him, where 3 wolves waited in the darkness. You know what to do, Fenric said quietly. Make it look like an accident. A tragedy of the disputed lands claiming 3 foolish explorers. The assassins melted into the morning light, and in the depths of the Moonwell Temple, something ancient stirred. It had been waiting 50 years for an Ashenvale to return. Soon it would have its answers, or it would have its revenge. Chapter 9. The disputed lands earned their name honestly. What had once been fertile territory, claimed by 3 different packs, was now a wasteland of twisted trees and cracked earth. 50 years of neglect had turned it into something neither wild nor civilized, just forgotten. Mira, Davron, and Kale had been traveling for 2 days, following old trade routes that nature had begun to reclaim. The further they went from Thornridge, the quieter the world became. Even the birds seemed reluctant to sing here. We're being followed, Kale said quietly, his amber eyes scanning the tree line. Davron's hand moved to his sword hilt. How many? 3, maybe 4. They've been keeping pace since yesterday morning. Mira felt a chill run down her spine. Assassins. Or desperate rogues, Davron replied. Either way, we need to be ready. They made camp that evening in a clearing surrounded by ancient oaks. Davron insisted on taking first watch while Mira and Kale attempted to rest. But sleep wouldn't come. Mira lay on her bedroll, staring up at the stars visible through the canopy, her mother's pendant warm against her chest. She could feel something pulling at her. Not danger, but recognition. The Moonwell Temple was close now. Perhaps a day's travel at most. And whatever waited there knew she was coming. Can't sleep either? Kale's voice was soft beside her. Too many thoughts, Mira admitted. He shifted to face her, propping himself up on one elbow. Want to talk about them? Mira hesitated then. What if Isla is right? What if the temple does consume me? What happens to everything we've started to build? Then Davron and I carry it forward, Kale said simply. The new court is established. The corruption is being rooted out. You've already changed things, Mira. Even if the worst happens, you won't have failed. But there's so much more to do. There will always be more to do, Kale interrupted gently. That's life. But you can't sacrifice yourself trying to fix everything at once. Your mother didn't hide you, didn't curse you to protect you, just so you could throw your life away the moment you found your power. Mira turned to look at him. In the moonlight, his features were softer than usual, less guarded. When I was in that garden, Kale continued, starving and broken, I'd already given up. I thought I'd die there, forgotten and alone. And then you came. You brought food, yes, but more than that. You brought kindness without expecting anything in return. His voice dropped lower. You saved my life before you ever knew you had power. That's who you are, Mira. Not the seer, not the weapon, just someone who sees suffering and tries to ease it. Something warm bloomed in Mira's chest. Kale, I'm not finished, he said, a hint of his usual humor returning. I'm trying to make a profound point here. Mira smiled despite herself. What I'm saying is, the temple might show you truths about your power, about your bloodline, about what you're capable of. But don't let it change who you fundamentally are. Because that person, the one who fed a rogue everyone else wanted dead, she's worth more than any amount of power. Mira reached out and squeezed his hand. Thank you. Anytime. Now try to sleep. We'll need our strength tomorrow. But neither of them slept. And neither did Davron, who'd heard every word from his watch position and now stood staring into the darkness, wrestling with feelings he had no right to have for the seer who was supposed to heal his kingdom, not complicate his heart. The attack came at dawn. Mira woke to Davron's shout and rolled instinctively as a blade whistled through the space her head had occupied a moment before. 4 wolves in dark leather armor, their faces masked, descended on the camp with practiced precision. Assassins, then, not desperate rogues. Kale shifted immediately, his amber wolf form tackling one attacker before they could strike again. Davron engaged 2 more, his sword singing through the morning air. The 4th assassin came straight for Mira. She scrambled backward, her power rising instinctively. Stop, she commanded, voice ringing with seer authority. The assassin froze mid-strike, body locked by compulsion. But then something strange happened. The assassin's eyes, visible through the mask, began to bleed black. Dark veins spread across their visible skin, and they started moving again, fighting against her compulsion with unnatural strength. They're warded, Davron shouted, dodging a strike. Shadow magic, it's blocking your power. Mira's blood ran cold. Someone had prepared specifically to counter her abilities. The assassin lunged again. This time, Mira had no voice to stop them with. But she did have teeth. She shifted for the 2nd time in her life, her body exploding into her midnight black wolf form. The transformation was faster now, more natural, and she met the assassin's blade with claws that gleamed like moonlight. The fight was brutal and quick. Davron cut down one assassin. Kale tore the throat from another, and Mira's wolf instincts took over, driving her attacker back until they stumbled over a root and fell. She stood over them, fangs bared, ready to end it. Wait, Davron commanded. We need one alive for questioning. Mira's wolf wanted blood. Wanted revenge for the attack, for the shadow magic, for everything. But she forced herself back, shifting into human form with trembling limbs. Davron yanked the mask off the fallen assassin. The face beneath was young, barely past shifting age, and terrified. Who sent you? Davron demanded. The boy's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His eyes went wide with panic, and then black veins spread from his throat like poisoned roots. No. Davron grabbed him, but it was too late. The boy convulsed once and went still, dead by some failsafe curse built into the shadow ward. Damn it. Davron released the body, his face dark with fury. Kale shifted back to human form, breathing hard. Shadow magic and a suicide curse. Someone powerful sent them. Corrupted monsters had stood, ordinary wolves collapsed, confused, frightened, but themselves again. What? Fenric stared in disbelief. That's impossible. Shadow corruption can't be reversed. It can by someone who speaks truth to lies, Mira said. By someone who sees what is rather than what fear makes us believe. She knelt before him, her glowing eyes meeting his terrified gaze. Lord Fenric, you conspired with shadow practitioners. You sent assassins to murder me. You corrupted innocent wolves and sent them to die in your service. These are truths. Do you deny them? Fenric tried to speak, to lie, to deflect, but his mouth wouldn't form the words. The compulsion of her truth-speaking was absolute now, strengthened by the well's power. No, he finally gasped. I don't deny them. Why? Mira asked simply. Why do all this? Tears streamed down the old lord's face. Not from sorrow, but from the agony of truth being torn from him against his will. Because I was afraid, he whispered. Afraid of losing my position, my power, my legacy. The new court threatened everything I'd built, everything I was. And I couldn't. I couldn't just let it go. Mira felt something like pity stir in her chest. Fear makes monsters of us all if we let it. She stood, her judgment calm and final. You will live, Lord Fenric. But you'll return to Thornridge and confess everything you've done before the new court. Every conspiracy. Every crime. And you'll accept whatever sentence they choose. Not because I'm compelling you, but because it's the only way forward that doesn't end with you destroying yourself from the inside out. She released her compulsion. Fenric collapsed forward, sobbing. Broken but alive. Guilty, but offered a path to something resembling redemption. Cale limped over, shifting back to human form. I don't even have words for what that was. Davron emerged from the well behind Mira, his expression awed. You didn't just heal them. You showed mercy. Even after everything he did. Mira turned to look at him, at Cale, at the temple around them that had witnessed 3 generations of Ashenvale women making impossible choices. Because that's what truth requires, she said quietly. Not just judgment, not just punishment, but understanding. Seeing clearly what is, and still choosing to believe in what could be. Her eyes stopped glowing, fading back to their natural color. The power settled into her bones, no longer overwhelming but present, waiting for when she truly needed it. Now, she said, suddenly exhausted. Can we please go home? Davron caught her as she swayed, lifting her again, this time simply to support her, not to carry her into unknown depths. Home, he agreed. And then we rebuild. Together. As dawn broke over the Moonwell Temple, 4 figures began the long journey back to Thornridge. Mira, transformed but still herself. Davron, who'd followed her into darkness and found light. Cale, loyal beyond measure. And Lord Fenric, broken but beginning the slow path toward redemption. Behind them, the well glowed softly, its ancient magic satisfied. The last Ashenvale had made her choice, and the kingdom would be forever changed by it. Chapter 11. The return journey to Thornridge took 5 days. 5 days of slow travel with wounded wolves, confessions whispered around campfires, and Mira adjusting to the weight of power that now resided permanently in her bones. She could feel everything differently now. The truth of the world hummed beneath every conversation, every glance, every breath. When Cale said he was fine, she knew his ribs were still cracked. When Davron claimed he wasn't worried about the court's reaction, she felt the anxiety coiled tight in his chest. It was exhausting and illuminating in equal measure. The freed shadow wolves, 17 in total, traveled with them. Most were rogues Fenric had captured and corrupted, their crimes minor or fabricated entirely. A few had been actual criminals, but their sentences had been served years ago. None of them had chosen shadow magic willingly. They looked at Mira with a mixture of awe and terror. You saved us, one of them, a young woman named Sarah, said on the 3rd night. But we're still afraid of you. Mira had been tending the fire, her hands glowing faintly as she coaxed the flames higher without touching them. A side effect of the well's transformation that she was still learning to control. I understand, she replied quietly. Do you? Sarah's voice was gentle but probing. Do you understand what it's like to be afraid of someone who can make you do anything? Say anything? Someone who can look at you and know every secret you've ever kept. Mira met her eyes. Yes, because I'm afraid of myself now too. The honesty seemed to catch Sarah off guard. The power doesn't make me feel strong, Mira continued. It makes me feel responsible. Every word I speak now carries weight. Every command could reshape someone's life. And I have to live knowing that one moment of anger, one careless compulsion, could destroy everything I'm trying to build. She looked at the freed wolves gathered around the fire. So yes, I understand your fear. And I promise you this. I will never use my voice to control you unless your actions threaten innocent lives. That's the only line I won't compromise on. Sarah studied her for a long moment, then slowly nodded. That's fair. It wasn't trust yet, but it was a beginning. Later that night, Davron found Mira sitting alone on a rocky outcrop, staring up at the stars. You don't sleep anymore, he observed, settling beside her. I do. Just less. Another change from the well. Her body required less rest, less food, less of the things that made wolves mortal. It's like part of me is always awake now, always watching. That sounds lonely. Mira glanced at him. It is. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, shoulders almost touching. What you did at the temple, Davron said finally, choosing mercy for Fenric. That took more strength than killing him would have. Or more cowardice, Mira replied. Part of me wanted to end him, wanted to make him pay for every crime with blood. But you didn't, because my mother didn't hide me so I could become another tyrant, Mira said quietly. She wanted me to be better than the wolves who destroyed our family. And being better means choosing the harder path, even when rage demands the easy one. Davron turned to look at her fully. In the moonlight, his ice-blue eyes were luminous. You're remarkable, you know that? I'm terrifying, Mira corrected. You said so yourself. People fear what I represent. Some do, Davron acknowledged. But I don't. Not anymore. Why not? He hesitated then. Because I've seen you use your power. I've watched you compel truth from murderers, purge corruption from twisted wolves, and stop an army with a single word. And every single time, you've chosen restraint over domination, mercy over vengeance. His voice dropped lower. That's not terrifying. That's extraordinary. Something warm bloomed in Mira's chest. Davron, I'm not finished, he interrupted, echoing Kale's words from days earlier. When I followed you into that well, I thought I was going to watch you die, or transform into something so far beyond mortal that I'd lose you anyway. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he took her hand. But you chose to stay, he continued. You chose us, chose the messy, complicated, painful reality of being part of this world rather than transcending it. And I need you to know that means everything to me. Mira's breath caught. I care about you too. More than I probably should, given everything that's happening. Why shouldn't you? Davron asked. You're allowed to have feelings that aren't about duty or justice or fixing the kingdom. Because I'm the last Moon Seer, Mira said. Because everyone is watching me, waiting to see what I'll do next. Because if I make one wrong move, then you'll make a mistake, Davron finished. Like every other wolf alive. Mira, you're not required to be perfect. You're not required to sacrifice everything, including happiness, for the good of the kingdom. Aren't I? Mira's voice cracked slightly. Isn't that what power demands? No, Davron said firmly. That's what fear demands. Power demands responsibility, yes. But responsibility includes taking care of yourself, including letting people close enough to help carry the weight. He squeezed her hand gently. Let me help carry it. Mira stared at him, seeing not the cold alpha prince but the wolf who'd defended her in the council chamber, who'd walked into the well despite not knowing if he'd survive, who'd chosen justice over easy power at every turn. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. How to be a seer and just a person. How to lead without losing myself. Neither do I, Davron said with a slight smile. I'm figuring out how to be an alpha who serves rather than rules. We can figure it out together. Mira leaned against his shoulder, allowing herself this moment of vulnerability. Deal. They sat together under the stars, two wolves learning to carry power without being consumed by it. When they arrived at Thornridge Castle 5 days after leaving it, they found the courtyard filled with waiting wolves. The new court stood at the center, flanked by guards and observers. Archon Isla was there, her silver eyes sharp. The freed council members who'd been exiled watched from the edges, uncertain of their reception. And at the front, wearing the formal robes of the court speaker, stood Marin Swiftpaw. Lady Mira Ashenvale, she called as their group approached. The court has been informed of Lord Fenrick's actions and awaits your testimony. Fenrick stepped forward voluntarily, his shoulders bent with shame but his eyes clear. I'm ready to confess everything. No compulsion needed. Mira studied him, seeing the truth of his words. The journey had changed him. Not fully, but enough. The weight of his crimes was crushing him, and he'd finally accepted that the only path forward was through honesty. The court will hear you, Marin said. But first, she turned to Mira, we must address the matter of your transformation. Reports say you entered the Moonwell Temple and emerged changed. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Mira stepped forward, feeling every eye on her. It's true. The temple enhanced my abilities. But I'm still myself. Still bound by the same principles I held before. Can you prove that? Asked one of the court representatives, a grizzled wolf from the Southern Territories. Can you prove you haven't become something beyond our laws? Mira could have compelled them to believe her, could have used her enhanced voice to make them trust without question. Instead, she said simply, No, I can't prove it. You'll have to decide for yourselves whether my actions match my words. The honesty seemed to surprise them. Archon Isla stepped forward. The Ashenvale line has always valued truth over comfort. If Lady Mira says she remains committed to serving rather than ruling, I believe her. But I also propose a safeguard. All eyes turned to the elderly scholar. Let the court appoint a council of oversight, Isla continued. 3 wolves not of noble blood, chosen by lottery from the general population, who will meet with Lady Mira monthly. She will answer their questions truthfully, and they will report to this court whether her power is being used justly. It was brilliant, a way to maintain accountability without restricting Mira's ability to act in emergencies. Davron nodded immediately. The Alpha's throne supports this measure. Mira felt a weight lift from her shoulders. As do I. I welcome the oversight. The court deliberated briefly, then Marin announced. The measure passes. Lady Mira will remain free to use her gifts as needed, but under the watchful eyes of representatives chosen by the people. It wasn't perfect, but it was fair. And more importantly, it was chosen, not imposed by ancient bloodlines or corrupt councils, but agreed upon by wolves trying to build something better. Over the next several days, Thornridge transformed. Fenrick's confession led to the exposure of 3 more shadow practitioners hiding among the nobility. They were tried, convicted, and stripped of their positions, but not executed. Instead, they were sentenced to service, helping rebuild the seer villages their predecessors had destroyed, working alongside former servants and rogues to create something new from the ashes of the old. The 17 freed shadow wolves were offered positions in the Castle Guard, the Healers' Guild, or the new agricultural projects being established in reclaimed territories. Most accepted, grateful for the chance to rebuild their lives. And the Oversight Council was chosen. An elderly healer named Tom, a young merchant called Lissa, and a former rogue named Garrett. They met with Mira weekly, asking pointed questions about her power's use and her intentions. She answered every question truthfully, even when the answers made her uncomfortable. Do you ever want to just command everyone to do what you think is right? Lissa asked during their 3rd meeting. Yes, Mira admitted. Sometimes I see the easiest path forward, and I know I could make everyone follow it. The temptation is always there. What stops you? Tom asked gently. The memory of what that kind of thinking created, Mira replied. The old council believed they knew best. They made choices for everyone else for the greater good. And it led to genocide, corruption, and a kingdom built on lies. She met their eyes. I won't repeat their mistakes. Even if it means things move more slowly. Even if it means watching wolves make choices I disagree with. Because freedom, real freedom, includes the right to choose wrong. Garrett nodded slowly. That's a good answer. It's the only answer I have, Mira said. 2 months after returning from the Moonwell Temple, Mira stood in the newly restored Seer Memorial Garden. It had been built on the site of one of the original Ashenvale settlements, using stones from the ruined houses and planting silverleaf trees in honor of those who died. At its center stood a simple monument, a carved wolf howling at the moon, with the names of the murdered families etched into the stone base. Mira touched her mother's name gently. Lina Ashenvale, truth speaker, mother, guardian. I wish you could see this, she whispered. See what we're building. It's messy and slow and sometimes frustrating, but it's real, and it's honest. Footsteps approached. She didn't need to turn to know it was Davron. She'd learned to recognize the rhythm of his walk, the particular truth of his presence. The court's in session, he said. They're debating the trade agreements with the Eastern Pax. Passionate arguments on both sides. But no violence, Mira asked. Just very loud disagreement. He smiled. Democracy is noisy. Good, Mira said. Silence is what allowed the old council to operate in darkness. Let there be noise. Let there be argument. Let everyone have a voice. Davron moved to stand beside her, his shoulder touching hers. You've changed the kingdom, you know. In just 2 months, you've given wolves permission to question, to challenge, to participate. That's remarkable. We've changed it, Mira corrected. You, Mikhail, the new court, even Lord Fenrick in his way. Change requires many hands. Speaking of hands, Davron took hers, his voice suddenly nervous. There's something I want to ask you. Mira turned to face him fully, her enhanced senses reading the truth of his emotions. Hope, fear, determination. The kingdom is stabilizing, he continued. The new court is functioning. The Oversight Council trusts you. And I've been thinking about what comes next. For both of us. He took a breath. Mira Ashenvale, last of the Moon Seers, would you consider? That is, would you do me the honor of? Yes, Mira said, smiling. Davron blinked. I haven't finished asking. You want to know if I'll stand beside you? If I'll be your partner in leading this kingdom towards something better? If I'll bind my life to yours in the old way, as seers and alphas once did centuries ago? Mira's eyes glowed faintly. The answer is yes. I hate that you can read me so easily, Davron said, but he was grinning. Get used to it, Mira replied. I can always tell when you're lying about eating breakfast. He laughed and pulled her into his arms, and for a moment they simply stood together in the memorial garden. Two wolves who'd found each other in the darkest of times and chosen to build something bright. I love you, Davron whispered. Truth speaker, seer, and the most stubborn wolf I've ever met. I love you too, Mira replied. Winter wolf, alpha, and the only person brave enough to follow me into a magical well. They kissed as the silver-leaf trees rustled overhead, and somewhere in the distance, Kale's voice called out. Are you two done being dramatic? The court's asking for you. They broke apart, laughing. Duty calls, Davron said. Always, Mira agreed. But this time they walked toward it together. Chapter 12. The bonding ceremony was planned for the first full moon after the spring equinox, a time traditionally reserved for new beginnings. But tradition was where the similarities to old royal ceremonies ended. Instead of holding it in the castle's grand hall, where only nobles could attend, Davron and Mira chose the memorial garden. Instead of ancient bloodline rituals conducted by corrupt elders, they asked Archon Isla to officiate, with the Oversight Council standing as witnesses alongside Kale and representatives from every pack. It would be public, open, a symbol of the new kingdom they were building together. You're nervous, Kale observed, watching Mira pace the tower chamber 3 days before the ceremony. I'm terrified, Mira admitted. What if I'm making a mistake? What if binding myself to Davron compromises my ability to speak truth to power? What if you're overthinking this? Kale interrupted gently. You love him. He loves you. Everything else is just noise. Mira stopped pacing. When did you become the wise one? I've always been wise, Kale replied with mock offense. You were just too busy being dramatic to notice. Despite her anxiety, Mira smiled. Thank you. For everything. For staying even when I was insufferable. You're still insufferable, Kale said. But you're my insufferable seer, so I'm stuck with you. They embraced, and Mira felt the truth of their bond. Not romantic, but no less powerful. He was Pack in the truest sense, chosen family when blood family had been stolen. I'm glad you found me in that garden, she whispered. Me too, Kale replied. The morning of the ceremony dawned clear and bright. Mira dressed in robes of midnight blue threaded with silver, colors representing both her wolf form and her seer heritage. Her hair hung loose, the distinctive silver stripe gleaming in the sunlight. She wore her mother's pendant, warm against her skin. As she prepared to leave the tower, there was a soft knock at the door. Come in, Mira called. To her surprise, Elder Thessa entered, the former council member who'd confessed her crimes 2 months prior. She looked older now, worn down by guilt and hard labor in the rebuilding projects, but her eyes were clearer than they'd been in the council chamber. I know I have no right to be here, Thessa said quietly, but I wanted to give you something before the ceremony. She held out a small wooden box, intricately carved with wolf patterns. Mira took it carefully and opened the lid. Inside, nestled in silk, was a thin circlet of silver set with moonstones, delicate and ancient. It belonged to your mother, Thessa said. I took it after she died. Kept it as a trophy. But it should be yours. Should have always been yours. Mira's throat tightened. She lifted the circlet gently, feeling her mother's magic still clinging to the metal. Faint but unmistakable. Why are you giving this to me now? She asked. Because I can't change what I did, Thessa replied. But I can stop stealing what was never mine. And because, she paused. Because I want you to know that some of us, those of us who participated in the purge, were trying to be better, trying to earn forgiveness we don't deserve. Mira studied the older woman's face, reading the truth of her words, the genuine remorse. Thessa would carry her guilt until death. That was unchangeable. But she was choosing to carry it forward rather than let it crush her. Thank you, Mira said quietly, for returning this. And for trying. Thessa's eyes glistened. Be happy today. You've earned it. Then she was gone, leaving Mira holding her mother's circlet with trembling hands. The memorial garden was transformed. Silver ribbons hung from the trees, fluttering in the gentle breeze. The entire courtyard was filled with wolves. Nobles and servants, rogues and guards, merchants and healers, all gathered as equals to witness the ceremony. At the center, beneath an arch woven from moon vines, stood Davron. He wore formal robes of silver gray that made his ice-blue eyes even more striking. His pale hair was pulled back, revealing the strong lines of his face. And when he saw Mira approaching, his expression shifted into something so openly adoring that several people in the crowd sighed. Mira walked forward, Kale at her right and Archon Isla at her left, through an aisle of wolves who bowed not in subservience, but in respect. When she reached the arch, Davron took her hands, and the world seemed to narrow to just the two of them. "Ready," he whispered. "Terrified," Mira whispered back. "You, same. Let's do this anyway." Archon Isla raised her hands. And the crowd fell silent. "We gather under the moon's light," she began, her voice carrying across the garden, "to witness the binding of two souls who have chosen to walk together. Not because bloodlines demand it, not because politics require it, but because love, true, freely given love, has brought them to this moment." She turned to Davron. "Davron Thornridge, alpha of this territory, son of a flawed king. What do you offer this seer?" Davron's voice was steady and clear. "I offer my strength when she is weary, my honesty when she needs truth, my silence when she needs to speak, and my heart, freely given, for as long as we both live." Isla turned to Mira. "Mira Ashenvale, last of the Moon Seers, daughter of truth, what do you offer this alpha?" Mira felt tears prick her eyes. "I offer my voice when he needs counsel, my power when his is not enough, my challenge when he strays from justice, and my heart, freely given, for as long as we both live. Then let your binding be witnessed by moon and pack alike," Isla said. She took a silver cord, blessed by moonlight and woven with herbs that symbolized fidelity and strength, and wrapped it around their joined hands. "The old ways taught that mates were chosen by destiny," Isla continued. "But you two have chosen each other despite destiny's silence. That is a stronger bond than any the gods could forge." Magic stirred in the air. Not just seer magic, but the natural power of pack bonds forming, strengthening, solidifying. Davron leaned forward and whispered, "I love you, truth speaker." "I love you, winter wolf," Mira replied. They kissed as the crowd erupted in howls of joy, a sound so pure and celebratory that even the stones of the castle seemed to ring with it. When they broke apart, Isla announced, "I present to you Davron and Mira Thornridge Ashenvale, bound by choice, strengthened by love, and witnessed by all." The celebration that followed lasted until dawn. Tables laden with food filled the courtyard. Musicians played instruments from every region. Wolves danced and laughed and told stories. Nobles mingling freely with former servants. Old enemies sharing drinks and finding common ground. It was chaotic and loud and absolutely perfect. Mira found herself pulled into conversation after conversation. Wolves wanting to congratulate her, ask about her plans, share their hopes for the future. She answered each question patiently, using her power sparingly, and only when someone's truth needed to be gently revealed. Near midnight, she found a quiet corner and watched the celebration with wonder. Overwhelmed, Davron appeared beside her, offering a cup of wine. "Grateful," Mira corrected. "2 months ago, I was a voiceless servant. Now I'm standing at my own bonding ceremony, watching wolves from every background celebrate together." "You did this," Davron said. "Your courage started it all." "We did this," Mira corrected. "And we're not done yet." Davron raised his cup. "To many more years of messy, complicated, beautiful progress." Mira clinked her cup against his. "I'll drink to that." As the moon reached its zenith, Archon Isla approached them. "There's one more tradition," she said, her silver eyes gleaming. "If you're willing." She gestured toward the memorial stone at the garden's center, the one carved with the names of murdered seers. The old way taught that bonded pairs should make an oath together, not to each other, but to those who came before. A promise to honor their memory through action. Mira and Davron exchanged glances, then nodded. They approached the memorial stone together, the crowd falling silent once more. Mira placed her hand on her mother's name. Davron placed his beside it. "We swear," they said in unison, their voices blending, "to build a kingdom where truth is valued over comfort, where justice is chosen over convenience, where every wolf, regardless of blood or station, has a voice that matters. Magic flared around them, the memorial stone glowing with soft silver light. "We swear to honor those who fell by ensuring their deaths meant something," they continued. "By creating the world they dreamed of but never lived to see." The light intensified, and for just a moment, Mira could have sworn she saw figures standing around them, translucent and faint, but present. Her mother, her grandmother, her great-grandmother, all the Ashenvales who'd come before, bearing witness. "You've done well," a familiar voice whispered in her mind. "Keep going, my daughter. Keep choosing light." Then the vision faded, and they were alone again, but not truly alone. Never truly alone. The celebration continued until the sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. As the last guests departed, Mira and Davron stood together in the empty garden, exhausted but content. "So," Davron said, pulling her close, "how does it feel to be officially bound to the winter wolf?" "Terrifying," Mira replied honestly. "And wonderful. And right. Good answer." He kissed her forehead. "Ready for what comes next?" Mira thought about the challenges still ahead, the territories that still needed healing, the pacts that still needed convincing, the corruption that inevitably would try to creep back in. But she also thought about the wolves who'd celebrated with them tonight, the new court finding its voice, the freed shadow wolves rebuilding their lives, the kingdom slowly, painfully, beautifully transforming into something better. "Ready," she said. And as the sun rose over Thornridge Castle, two wolves stood together in the garden of memory and promise, building the future one truth at a time. Far away, in the depths of the forest where even brave wolves feared to tread, something ancient stirred. It had watched the ceremony, felt the power of the binding, sensed the strength of pack bonds reforming after decades of corruption. And it smiled. Not all shadows were evil. Not all darkness was corruption. Some were simply waiting, for the right moment, the right wolves, the right question. Soon, the seer would need to venture deeper still, to face truths not about the kingdom, but about the very nature of reality itself. But that was a story for another day. For now there was light, there was love, there was hope, and that was enough. Chapter 13. Spring turned to summer, and the kingdom of Thornridge continued its transformation. The new court found its rhythm. Debates grew more efficient, decisions more confident, and wolves from every background learned to navigate the messy beauty of shared governance. It wasn't perfect. Arguments still flared. Old prejudices still surfaced. But the difference now was that problems were addressed openly rather than festering in shadow. Mira spent her days walking a careful line between power and restraint. She attended court sessions, offering her voice when asked but never imposing it. She met with the Oversight Council monthly, answering their increasingly sophisticated questions about power's temptations. And she worked with Archon Isla to document everything she was learning about seer abilities, creating a record so future generations wouldn't have to rediscover what had been lost. But as the seasons changed, so did the dreams. They started subtly, fragments of images that faded upon waking. But gradually they intensified into full visions that left her gasping awake in the pre-dawn darkness. She saw a forest where the trees grew downward, roots reaching toward a sky of earth. She saw wolves with eyes that held galaxies. She saw doorways carved from starlight leading to places that shouldn't exist. And always, at the center of these visions, stood a figure cloaked in silver mist, beckoning her forward. "You're having the dreams again," Davron said one morning, finding her on their balcony before sunrise. Mira didn't ask how he knew. After 6 months of being bonded, he could read her moods as easily as she could read truth. "They're getting stronger," she admitted. "More detailed. It's like something is trying to show me something, but I can't quite understand what." "The Oversight Council already knows," Mira interrupted gently. "I told them last week. Tom thinks it might be a side effect of the Wells transformation. Lissa worries it's something more dangerous. Garrett just wants me to be careful." "And you?" Davron asked. "What do you think?" Mira watched the sun begin to rise, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. "I think the truth I found at the Moonwell Temple was only one truth. And there are deeper ones waiting, older ones. Ones that might change everything we think we understand about what wolves are and where we came from." Davron was quiet for a moment. "That sounds ominous." "It feels inevitable," Mira replied. A week later, Cale burst into the council chamber during a routine session, his amber eyes wild. "There's something at the northern border," he said, breathing hard. "A rift. Reality itself is tearing." The court erupted in confusion. Mira and Davron exchanged glances and immediately adjourned the session. By the time they reached the northern border with a small group of guards and the Oversight Council, the rift was visible even from a distance. A jagged tear in the air itself, edges shimmering with the same silver mist from Mira's dreams. Through it, she could see another forest. But the trees there weren't right. Their bark seemed to flow like water, and their leaves sang with voices that had no source. "What is that?" Garrett whispered, his hand on his sword though no blade could cut reality itself. Mira stepped closer, feeling the pull she'd been experiencing in her dreams intensify. "It's a threshold, a doorway between our world and something else." "The spirit realm?" Isla asked, her scholarly curiosity overcoming her fear. "I don't think so," Mira said slowly. "The spirit realm is adjacent to ours, a reflection. This is something deeper, something that exists beneath all worlds." The figure from her dreams materialized at the rift's edge, still cloaked in silver mist, but more solid now. And when it spoke, its voice was neither male nor female, neither young nor old, but somehow all of these at once. "Daughter of Ashenvale, you have passed the first trials, found your voice, claimed your power, chosen mercy over vengeance. Now comes the deeper question. Are you ready to understand what you truly are?" Mira felt Davron's hand find hers, grounding her. "What am I?" she asked. "Not what you've been told," the figure replied. "The Moon Seers weren't just speakers of truth. They were translators, beings who could understand the language reality speaks to itself. The first language, the one that existed before wolves learned to shift, before humans learned to speak, before even the gods named themselves." The rift pulsed, and images flooded Mira's mind. The first wolf standing at the edge of consciousness itself, choosing to split its nature, to be both human and beast, both civilized and wild. The price of that choice, never feeling fully whole in either form. The first seer, learning to hear the whispers of that original division, understanding that truth wasn't about facts, but about the fundamental nature of existence itself. And the cost. Every seer who went too deep, who listened too closely to that primal language, lost the ability to exist in the simplified reality other wolves inhabited. They became something else, not destroyed but transformed beyond recognition. "Your great-grandmother didn't die in the moon well," the figure said. "She transcended, became part of the translation itself. She exists now as pure understanding, flowing between worlds, speaking truths too vast for mortal minds to hold." Mira's throat tightened. "Is that what you want from me? To transcend? To abandon everything I've built here?" "No," the figure said, and something like warmth entered its voice. "I want to offer you a choice your ancestors never had. Keep one foot in each world. Remain Mira, bonded, mortal, flawed, while also learning to hear the deeper truths. It will be painful. It will be difficult. You'll never fit completely in either realm. But you'll be able to help both." "Why?" Mira asked. "Why offer this now?" "Because the barriers between worlds are thinning," the figure replied. "Not from corruption this time, but from neglect. Wolves have forgotten their dual nature. They see shifting as power rather than responsibility. See truth as weapon rather than bridge. And if that continues, eventually the division will complete. Wolves will become fully human or fully beast, and the balance that has held for millennia will shatter." The rift pulsed again, wider this time. "Someone needs to stand at the threshold," the figure continued. "Someone who understands both sides. Someone who can translate when worlds need to communicate. Someone who chooses to remain incomplete so that others might stay whole." Mira looked at Davron, at Kale, at the Oversight Council watching with varying degrees of fear and fascination. "If I accept," she said slowly, "what happens to me?" "You'll change," the figure admitted. "Gradually over years. You'll age more slowly, perhaps not at all. You'll see truths others can't perceive. You'll feel increasingly alien to those you love, even as you work to protect them." It paused. "But you'll also be able to prevent catastrophes before they form. Hear warnings from realities adjacent to this one. Bridge gaps that would otherwise tear your world apart." "Another burden," Mira whispered. "Another weight." "Yes," the figure agreed. "But this time, you choose it knowing the full cost." Mira turned to Davron. "What do you think?" His ice-blue eyes held 1,000 emotions, Fear, love, pride, sorrow. I think you already know what you're going to choose. And I think I'll support you no matter what, even if it means watching you become something I can't fully understand. She looked at Kale. He nodded once, jaw tight but eyes trusting. The Oversight Council exchanged glances, then Tom spoke. If this is truly necessary to protect the kingdom, to protect all wolves, then we trust your judgment, Lady Mira. But we also hold you to your oath. Come back to us. Don't get so lost in the deep truths that you forget the simple ones. Mira smiled despite the tears threatening to fall. I promise. She turned back to the figure. I accept, but on one condition. The figure tilted its head. Speak. You teach me how to help others develop this ability, Mira said. I won't be the only threshold guardian. When I eventually transcend or fall or simply grow too alien to serve, there needs to be others who can take up this work. The Moon Seers will return, not as a single bloodline, but as a practice any wolf with courage and compassion can learn. The figure was silent for a long moment. Then it laughed, a sound like wind through impossible trees. Clever, it said. You seek not just to bridge worlds, but to build permanent bridges. Very well. I accept your condition. It extended a hand, or what might have been a hand, through the rift. Mira took a deep breath, squeezed Davron's hand one more time, and stepped forward. The moment she touched the figure, reality shifted. She stood simultaneously in two places. The northern border where her companions watched with held breath, and a space that existed outside normal perception. A realm where she could see the threads of possibility, the currents of truth, the fundamental structure of existence itself. It was overwhelming, beautiful, terrifying, and it felt like coming home to a place she'd never known existed. The training begins now, the figure said, but you may return to your body whenever you choose. Remember, you are the bridge, not the destination. Stay rooted in both worlds. Mira opened her eyes, though she wasn't sure they'd ever closed, and found herself back in the forest, Davron's arms around her, tears streaming down her face. I'm still here, she whispered. I'm still me. Always, Davron replied, voice thick with emotion. But she was also more now. Could see the threads connecting every wolf present. The truth of their fears and hopes written in light only she could perceive. The potential futures branching out like tree roots seeking water. She could see Kale's destiny. A guardian who would live long enough to train the next generation of protectors. Could see Davron's path. An alpha who would rule with wisdom until age finally claimed him, leaving behind a kingdom transformed. Could see the Oversight Council's futures, each playing vital roles in maintaining the balance between power and accountability. And she could see her own path, long and strange and lonely and necessary. She would stand at the threshold for decades, perhaps centuries, would guide kingdoms through transformations and catastrophes, would watch those she loved age and die while she remained caught between mortal and eternal. But she would also witness incredible beauty, would help create a world where truth and compassion walked hand in hand, would ensure that no child ever again had to lose their voice, their family, their identity to power's cruel appetite. It's worth it, she said aloud, though she wasn't sure who she was trying to convince, them or herself. Davron kissed her forehead. Then we'll make it worth it. Together, for as long as we can. They returned to Thornridge as the sun set, the rift sealed behind them, but Mira forever changed. That night, she began writing, not just documentation of seer abilities, but a manual. Instructions for any wolf brave enough to learn threshold work. Stories of what she'd seen, warnings of what to avoid, encouragement for those who would follow. She called it the Bridge Builder's Guide. And as word spread of what she was creating, wolves began to arrive at Thornridge from distant territories. Young and old, noble and common, each seeking to learn. Not because they wanted power, but because they wanted to serve. Mira taught them carefully, rigorously, with the help of Davron, Kale, and the Oversight Council. She taught them to hear truth without being consumed by it, to bridge worlds without losing themselves, to carry power lightly rather than wielding it like a weapon. The first graduates took 5 years to train. The second group, 3. By the time a decade had passed, there were 27 threshold guardians scattered across the kingdom, each watching over their communities, each translating when worlds needed to communicate. The Moon Seers had returned, not as a bloodline, but as a calling. And Mira stood at the center of it all, growing slowly into her role as the first and eldest. the one who would guide all others until the day came when even she would have to choose. Remain at the threshold, or step fully into the deeper truths her great-grandmother had chosen. But that day was far off. For now there was work to do, wolves to train, truths to bridge, a kingdom to nurture, and a bond with the winter wolf to treasure for as long as mortality would allow. 50 years later, the memorial garden had expanded over the decades. What had once been a simple stone monument now sprawled across several acres, filled with trees planted in honor of fallen wolves, benches where the elderly came to remember, and a library housing the complete works of threshold guardian training. Mira walked its paths alone in the early morning light, her appearance largely unchanged despite half a century having passed. Her hair held more silver now, not from age, but from the threshold work that left its mark in light rather than years. Davron had died 3 winters ago, peacefully in his sleep at the age of 74. His final words had been simple. "Thank you for staying as long as you did." Kale still lived, impossibly old for a wolf, but sustained by something neither of them fully understood. Perhaps guardian work extended life for those who chose it. Perhaps loyalty had its own magic. Either way, he remained her anchor to the mortal world. She stopped before a newer addition to the memorial. A statue of Davron in his prime, sword at his side, a slight smile on his carved face. At its base, fresh flowers. Someone still remembered. Someone still cared. "I miss you," Mira whispered. "Every day. But I'm keeping my promise. Still building bridges. Still teaching. Still choosing both worlds even when it hurts." Footsteps approached, young, hesitant. Mira turned to find a girl of perhaps 16, her eyes wide with nervousness. "Lady Mira?" the girl asked. "I'm sorry to disturb you, but I was told you might be here. I think I might be hearing things. Truth things. My parents sent me to see if—" She stopped, uncertain. Mira smiled warmly. "If you're called to threshold work?" The girl nodded. "Come," Mira said, gesturing toward a bench. "Sit with me. Tell me what you hear." As the girl hesitantly described the whispers of truth she'd been experiencing, Mira listened with the patience of decades. This was the work now. Not grand battles or court confrontations, but quiet conversations with frightened young wolves discovering they could perceive more than others. It was slower than saving kingdoms, but it was just as important. When the girl finished, Mira said gently, "What you're experiencing is real, and frightening, and also a gift if you choose to see it that way. I can teach you to understand it, to use it well, to carry it without being crushed, but only if you choose this path." "Is it hard?" the girl asked. "Very," Mira replied honestly. "You'll see truths others don't want acknowledged. You'll feel alien even among family. You'll carry weight that never fully lifts." She paused, then continued. "But you'll also help prevent suffering before it takes root. You'll bridge gaps that would otherwise tear communities apart. You'll matter in ways that won't earn statues or songs, but will change lives nonetheless." The girl considered this. "Did you ever regret it?" "Your choice." Mira looked at Davron's statue, at the garden full of memory and promise, at the young wolf waiting for truth. "Every day," she said. "And never once." The girl smiled slightly. "That doesn't make sense." "No," Mira agreed. "But that's truth for you. Rarely simple, never easy, always necessary." She stood, offering her hand. "Come, let me show you the training grounds. If you decide this is your path, we'll begin properly. And if not, at least you'll understand what you're choosing to walk away from." As they walked together through the morning garden, Mira felt the familiar pull of the threshold, that space between worlds where she now lived permanently. It was lonely. It was beautiful. It was exhausting and necessary, and more than she'd ever imagined when she was a voiceless servant girl feeding a rogue in a forgotten garden. But it was hers, her choice, her burden, her gift. And as long as there were young wolves like this girl, frightened and brave and seeking to understand the truth they carried, Mira would remain at the threshold, building bridges, one conversation at a time. Far away, in the space between worlds, the silver-misted figure watched with satisfaction. The first bridge was holding strong. Soon there would be others. And perhaps, in time, the boundaries between worlds wouldn't need guardians at all. Wolves would simply remember how to exist in both, comfortably incomplete, beautifully dual, perfectly imperfect. But that was a dream for distant futures. For now there was work. There was always work. And there was a seer still willing to do it. The end.